They laughed when I reached for the override panel. Colonel Brennan shoved my hand away, called me a glorified secretary playing soldier. But when that alarm screamed through the base and every screen went red, when chaos erupted and trained officers froze, I was the only one who knew the codes, the only one who could stop what was coming. This is the story of how being underestimated became my greatest weapon. What happened at Black Ridge Federal Research Facility didn't just change the base, it changed everything I thought I knew about power, loyalty, and revenge. If you've ever been called just anything, just an assistant, just support staff, just not enough, stay with me. And if this story resonates, hit that like button and subscribe. You'll want to hear how this ends. Because the day I touched that override panel, the day everything fell apart and came together at the same time, that was the day they finally saw me. And it was already too late. My name is Thalia Crane, and for 5 years, I was invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, literally. I could walk past the same people every single day in the corridors of Black Ridge Federal Research Facility, and they wouldn't remember my face. They'd remember the coffee I brought to meetings, sure. They'd remember when I forgot to order enough chairs for a briefing. But me? The actual human being behind the desk, in that windowless office tucked between the cafeteria and Security Wing B, I might as well have been a ghost. On paper, I was exactly what they thought I was. Administrative coordinator, Level 2 security clearance, 5 years of filing reports and scheduling meetings and answering phones that never stopped ringing. I typed emails about supply requisitions. I organized training calendars. I knew everyone's coffee order by heart. Colonel Brennan took his black 2 sugars. Lieutenant Cross wanted oat milk. No foam, exactly 140 degrees. I knew these things because knowing them was my job, because being useful meant being invisible, and invisible meant safe. But here's what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask. Before I became the woman who restocked the printer paper, I was Commander Thalia Crane, Military Intelligence, 7th Cyber Warfare Division. I'd run operations in places I still can't name, made calls that cost sleep and saved lives, carried the weight of decisions that left scars you can't see on an X-ray. And then one mission went wrong. The kind of wrong that ends with medical discharge papers and a therapist who says words like trauma response and career transition like they're supposed to make the nightmares stop. I took the admin job at Black Ridge because I needed to disappear. Not from the military exactly, but from the version of myself that couldn't stop seeing the faces of people I'd failed. I wanted fluorescent lights and filing cabinets and problems that could be solved with alphabetical order. I wanted to be small, quiet, forgotten. And for a while, it worked. The hum of the servers became white noise. The smell of industrial coffee and warm printer toner became comfort. My world shrank to a desk, a computer, a phone that rang on average 47 times a day. What I didn't plan on, what I couldn't have predicted, was that when I left military intelligence, someone forgot to revoke my commander-level credentials. A bureaucratic oversight. Probably some clerk who checked the wrong box on a discharge form. Those credentials sat buried in the system like a time bomb no one knew existed, including me at first. I only discovered them 8 months into the job, late one night when I was updating security databases and my old login accidentally auto-filled. I should have reported it. That would have been proper protocol. Instead, I just logged out, changed my password, and filed that information away in the back of my mind, the same place I'd filed away everything else from my old life. Black Ridge itself was the kind of facility that didn't officially exist on maps. High-security military research, classified weapons development, the sort of place where everyone had to pass through 3 checkpoints just to reach the parking lot. My workspace was perfect for someone who wanted to hide. No windows, no foot traffic unless someone needed me for something. Just me and the constant mechanical breathing of ventilation systems. Every morning I'd badge in, walk past officers who never made eye contact, sit at my desk, and make myself useful in ways that required no acknowledgement. Then Colonel Garrett Brennan transferred in, and everything changed. He arrived 6 months ago with a chest full of medals and an ego that entered rooms before he did. Ex-Special Forces, the kind of commander who measured respect in volume and intimidation. I remember his first day. He walked past my desk while I was on hold with supply logistics, and I smiled, started to introduce myself. He glanced at me the way you glance at furniture, decided I wasn't worth interrupting his conversation with Lieutenant Felicity Cross, and kept walking. His handshake when we were formally introduced later was the kind that barely touches fingers, the kind that says, "You don't matter," without using words. And just like that, invisible became something worse. Invisible became dismissed. The first time Colonel Brennan dismissed me, I told myself it was an accident. We were in a staff meeting, 12 people around a conference table, and I'd noticed something in the security protocol documentation, a gap in our firewall update schedule that left us vulnerable during shift changes. I raised my hand like I was back in school, waited for a pause in the conversation, and started to explain what I'd found. I got maybe 3 sentences in before Brennan cut me off mid-word. "Sweetheart," he said, and that word landed like a slap. "Let's leave the thinking to people trained for it. How about more coffee instead?" The room went silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then Lieutenant Cross laughed. This light, tinkling sound that gave everyone else permission to join in. "That's what admin is for, right?" she added. And just like that, I became the punchline. I remember the heat rising to my cheeks, the security report trembling in my hands, the way I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I poured the coffee. I said nothing. And I felt something inside me that had been healing start to crack open again. It got worse. It always gets worse when people realize you won't fight back. 2 months in, I'm eating lunch alone in the cafeteria. I was always alone by then, reviewing security logs on my tablet because old habits die hard, and I'd noticed some unusual access patterns. Master Sergeant Devon Price sat down across from me without asking, brought 3 of his guys with him, and they started talking about me like I wasn't there. "The cute little secretary thinks she understands military operations," Price said, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. His cologne was overwhelming, mixed with the smell of cafeteria grease and institutional cleaning products. One of his guys reached over and closed my tablet mid-sentence, then patted my head like I was a golden retriever. "Stick to scheduling, Thalia," he said. "War games aren't your department." I left my salad on the table, left my dignity there too. My legs felt numb walking back to my office, and I remember thinking that this was worse than anything that had happened overseas, because at least there, people had seen me as human. Here, I was furniture that occasionally spoke out of turn. But the worst came 4 months into Brennan's command, during a base-wide briefing in the main auditorium. Someone had called in sick, and I got added to the agenda last minute to present a report on system vulnerabilities I'd been tracking. 200 personnel in that room, 200 witnesses. I walked to the podium with papers that felt damp from my nervous sweat, and I made it exactly 3 sentences into my presentation before Colonel Brennan stood up from the front row. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cutting through the space like a blade. "Who authorized admin staff to waste our time with technical assessments they're not qualified to give?" The auditorium went dead silent. I could hear the ventilation system, the buzz of the projector, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Lieutenant Cross was smirking in the second row, her expression so satisfied it made my stomach turn. Brennan kept going. "Ms. Crane, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps stick to what you know, like organizing the supply closet." The laughter that followed wasn't just sound, it was physical. It hit me in waves, echoed off the walls, filled every corner of that massive room. I gathered my papers with fingers that had gone completely numb, walked back to my seat past 200 faces. Some people looked away, embarrassed for me. Most were grinning. A few were actually wiping tears from laughing so hard. No one, not one single person, said a word in my defense. I sat through the rest of that briefing staring at my hands, and I realized something crystallized and cold. They didn't just dismiss me, they enjoyed it. My humiliation was entertainment, a break in the monotony of their day. And the more I tried to prove I was worth listening to, the funnier they found me. That night, I sat in my office until 2 a.m., staring at my resignation letter on the screen. My finger hovered over the send button for 20 minutes. But something stopped me. That old instinct from my intelligence days, the one that had kept me alive in situations where hesitation meant death. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And if I left now, no one would be watching for it. So I started digging instead. Late nights became my refuge. After everyone left, after the fluorescent lights dimmed on timers and the cleaning crew made their rounds, I'd sit in my windowless office and dig through security logs that admin staff supposedly couldn't access. Except I could, because buried in the system, my old commander credentials still opened doors that were supposed to be locked. What I found made my blood run cold. The security breach from 3 weeks ago, the one they'd all dismissed as a random probe, nothing serious, wasn't random at all. Someone had been testing the system, learning our patterns, mapping our defenses like a surgeon studying anatomy before making the first cut. The timestamps were deliberate, strategically spaced to avoid detection algorithms. But I'd seen this pattern before, in classified briefings from my intelligence days. This was reconnaissance. Professional, patient, and absolutely deliberate. Then I found something worse. Internal logs showed that someone with high-level access had been systematically disabling backup protocols. Not all at once, that would trigger alerts. Just one here, one there, over the course of months. Whoever was doing this knew exactly which safeguards to remove to create maximum vulnerability while maintaining plausible deniability. This wasn't just an external threat anymore. Someone on the inside was helping them. I spent 4 days compiling everything into a report, 47 pages of evidence, charts showing the intrusion patterns, timestamps cross-referenced with internal system changes, actionable recommendations for immediate implementation. I formatted it according to military standards, triple-checked every citation, and submitted it through proper channels directly to Colonel Brennan's office. Then I waited. 3 days of silence, nothing. No acknowledgement, no questions, not even a dismissive email. On the 4th day, I followed up with his assistant, another admin who'd started avoiding eye contact with me after the auditorium incident. She barely looked up from her computer when she told me he'd glanced at it and filed it away. The way she said it, I knew exactly where it had been filed, straight into the trash. I tried Lieutenant Cross next, sent her the report with a red-flagged priority marker. She didn't even open the attachment before responding. "Thalia, this obsession is concerning. Maybe take some personal leave?" That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I went directly to Brennan's office, didn't schedule an appointment, didn't ask permission. Just knocked and walked in before he could tell me to go away. He was at his desk, mid-conversation on the phone, and the look he gave me could have stripped paint. "Sir, you need to read this report," I said, hating how my voice shook but pushing through anyway. "The base is vulnerable. Someone's coordinating with—" He held up one finger, finished his phone conversation at a deliberately leisurely pace, then stood up and walked around his desk. I could smell his aftershave, something expensive and aggressive. I could see the vein pulsing in his temple, that meant his temper was about to detonate. "You want to know what your problem is, Thalia?" He stepped closer, using every inch of his height to loom over me. "You're a burned-out has-been who couldn't hack real military work, so you took a desk job and now you're playing make-believe to feel important." Each word was surgical, designed to cut deep. But he wasn't done. "You're admin staff, just admin staff. You don't have the training, the clearance, or frankly the intelligence to understand what happens on this base." He picked up my report, 47 pages of work, of evidence, of warnings that could save lives, and dropped it into his trash can, maintained eye contact the entire time. "Stop wasting my time, and if you bypass protocols to bother me again, you're fired." I left his office, and this time I wasn't shaking. This time, my hands were steady. Because the part of me that had been Commander Crane, the part I'd buried under 5 years of coffee orders and filing systems, had just woken up. And she was done asking permission. They wanted to ignore the threat? Fine. But I wasn't going to let their arrogance burn down everything around us. I went back to my desk, pulled up the security monitors I wasn't supposed to have access to, and I started watching. Waiting. Because something was coming. And when it did, I'd be the only one ready. It happened at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I'd been staring at the clock, unable to sleep, sitting at my desk reviewing the same security logs for the 100th time. Then, every screen in my office flashed red simultaneously, and my heart stopped. Sector 7 firewall breach, active intrusion, classified systems compromised. But here's what made my blood turn to ice. The base alarm wasn't sounding. No sirens, no emergency protocols, nothing. The facility was completely silent except for the hum of my computer fan. I pulled up the emergency response systems and felt my stomach drop. Someone had disabled them. Every single failsafe I'd warned about, every backup protocol I'd documented in that report Brennan had trashed, they were offline. And the security team that should have been automatically alerted, they had no idea we were under attack. I ran, sprinted down empty corridors, my footsteps echoing off concrete walls, my badge slapping against my chest. The security command center was my first stop, if I could just get someone to see what was happening. But when I swiped my badge, the reader flashed red. Access denied. Someone had locked me out remotely, and I knew exactly why. Because whoever was doing this from the inside knew I'd been asking questions. I pounded on the reinforced door, and the night guard looked up from his magazine with the annoyed expression of someone whose quiet shift just got interrupted. Through the glass, I could see the security screens behind him, and there it was, clear as day. External hostiles accessing our classified servers in real time, downloading weapons schematics, personnel records, everything. I'm Thalia Crane, administrative staff. There's a breach in Sector 7. You need to... Admin doesn't have clearance here, he said, already looking back down at his magazine. Go back to your desk. He couldn't see it. The skeleton night crew hadn't noticed yet because someone had carefully disabled every alert that should have woken them up. In maybe 4 minutes, we'd lose everything. Years of classified research, defense systems, names of intelligence operatives still in the field. People would die because of this, and I was standing outside a locked door being dismissed by a guard who thought I was hysterical. I ran again, this time to Central Operations, the brain of the entire facility. My regular badge wouldn't work there, I knew that. But my hands were already reaching for my wallet, pulling out the military ID I'd kept folded behind my driver's license for 5 years, the one with my real credentials. Commander-level clearance, Level 9 access, biometric confirmation still registered in a system that had forgotten I existed. I pressed it against the reader and watched the light flash red once, twice, my entire body shaking. Then green. The door unlocked with a heavy metallic click that sounded like salvation. Central Operations was empty. Night shift was 3 floors down, minimal staffing per protocol. The main console stretched across the far wall, multiple screens showing the nightmare unfolding in real time. Classified weapon schematics copying, security grids failing, access points falling like dominoes. The progress bar on the data extraction showed 3 minutes and 42 seconds until complete facility compromise. I dropped into the operator's chair, fingers flying across the keyboard on pure muscle memory. My old training kicked in like I'd never left, like 5 years of filing papers had been just a blink. But every command I entered came back the same way. Access denied. The person coordinating this from inside had locked out emergency protocols at the root level, except they didn't know about the commander override, the one that required biometric confirmation and Level 9 clearance, the one only a handful of people on this base should have, the failsafe built for exactly this scenario when all other options were exhausted and seconds mattered more than protocol. My hand hovered over the scanner. Once I did this, there was no hiding anymore. No more being invisible. Everyone would know exactly who I was, what I'd been, and that I'd kept it secret for 5 years. The data extraction timer hit 3 minutes. I pressed my thumb to the scanner and activated the override. Every screen in the facility exploded red. Sirens erupted through the base like the end of the world. And I finally stopped being a ghost. The override engaged, and Blackridge came alive like someone had hit it with a defibrillator. Steel security doors slammed shut throughout the facility with sounds like thunder. Emergency lighting flooded every corridor. Backup power systems surged online with a mechanical roar I could feel through the floor. And on every screen in front of me, I watched the breach stop spreading. Just stop. Frozen mid-extraction. Isolated, contained. I had maybe 90 seconds alone before they came. 90 seconds where I was just Commander Crane again, hands steady on the controls, doing what I'd been trained to do. It felt like coming home and like losing something at the same time. Then the door burst open, and Sergeant Price came through first, weapon drawn, eyes scanning for threats. He saw me at the console, and his face went through confusion, anger, and something close to fear in the span of a heartbeat. "What the hell are you—" Lieutenant Cross was right behind him, then Colonel Brennan, both of them in various states of half-dressed uniform because the alarm had pulled them from sleep. Brennan's expression was the one I'd remember forever, confusion melting into rage, then freezing into something else entirely as he registered what was on the screens behind me. Threat contained, system secured, breach logged, traced, and locked down. "Crane?" His voice cracked on my name. "How did you don't have access to—" I stood up slowly, turned to face them, and felt every ounce of humiliation from the past 6 months crystallize into something cold and sharp. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My voice didn't waver. "I have Level 9 Commander clearance," I said. Each word came out precise, controlled, nothing like the trembling woman they'd spent months tearing down. "Thalia Crane, former intelligence commander, 7th Cyber Warfare Division, medical discharge, 2019. My credentials were never fully deactivated." I watched the realization hit Brennan's face like a physical blow. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Behind him, more security personnel were filing in, and I could see phones coming out, word already spreading through the base like wildfire. "The breach I warned you about 3 weeks ago?" I gestured to the screens, let them see the evidence displayed in real time. "It just happened. The vulnerabilities I reported, they exploited every single one. The backup protocols I said were compromised, someone disabled them from the inside to make sure this attack would succeed." Lieutenant Cross actually stepped backward, her face draining of color. "I traced the insider access to a compromised account in your command staff, still running the full analysis, but preliminary data suggests a phishing attack someone fell for and never reported." I let my eyes move to Cross, watched her flinch. "Security protocols exist for a reason, Lieutenant." I pulled up my original report on the main display, all 47 pages, every warning highlighted in red, the submission timestamp showing exactly when Brennan had received it, the timestamp showing when he'd deleted it. "I sent this to you, Colonel. You threw it in the trash and told me I didn't have the intelligence to understand this base." My voice stayed level, but everyone in that room could hear the edge underneath. If I hadn't overridden the lockdown manually, we'd have lost classified weapons data to a foreign intelligence service, the kind of loss that ends careers, ends facilities, gets operatives killed in the field. The silence was absolute. Someone's radio crackled with chatter from other parts of the base, but no one moved to answer it. "But I'm just admin staff, right?" I said quietly. "Just a glorified secretary playing soldier. Just not qualified to understand what happens here." Brennan tried to recover, pulled himself up to his full height, reached for his command voice. "You should have gone through proper channels." "I did." The words came out harder than I'd intended, filling the entire operations center. I wasn't yelling, but the force behind it made several people physically step back. "I gave you evidence, data, professional recommendations backed by years of military intelligence experience. You called me a has-been playing make-believe. You mocked me in front of 200 personnel. You told me to organize the supply closet." I looked at each of them in turn. Price, Cross, Brennan. "So tell me, Colonel, now that I've stopped an attack you didn't even know was happening, who exactly isn't qualified for their job?" No one answered, and in that silence, everything changed. Federal investigators arrived before sunrise. I watched them come through the security checkpoints in their dark suits and serious expressions, carrying cases full of equipment that would tear apart our systems looking for answers. My report, the one Brennan had trashed, became Exhibit A. Suddenly, those 47 pages everyone had dismissed were being read by people who actually understood what they were looking at. The investigation moved fast when national security is on the line. Within 18 hours, they'd traced everything. Lieutenant Cross's credentials had been compromised 6 weeks ago through a sophisticated phishing email, one she'd clicked on and never reported because she didn't want to look foolish. That single moment of vanity had given hostile actors a backdoor into our entire facility. Sergeant Price had ignored 14 separate security alerts over 3 months because he didn't think they mattered, because he was too busy mocking the admin staff to actually do his job. And Colonel Brennan? He'd systematically dismissed every warning, deleted every piece of evidence, created the perfect storm of negligence that nearly cost us everything. I watched it all unfold from my windowless office, still sitting at the same desk where I'd spent 5 years being invisible. Federal agents kept coming to ask me questions, and each time they called me Commander Crane, I saw the other staff members' heads turn. Word spread through Blackridge like a virus, faster than the actual cyberattack had moved. The secretary was a decorated intelligence officer. The woman they'd laughed at had commander-level clearance. The person they'd treated like furniture had saved the entire facility. Lieutenant Cross was reassigned within 48 hours, pending discharge proceedings. I saw her leaving, escorted by security, carrying a single box of personal items. She didn't look at me. Sergeant Price got demoted 2 ranks and sent for remedial security training, the kind they give to fresh recruits who don't know which end of a firewall is up. And Brennan? Colonel Garrett Brennan was relieved of command, facing a formal investigation into criminal negligence that could end with prison time. His career, that ego he'd worn like armor, all of it gone in less than a week. I should have felt victorious, vindicated. Instead, I felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the 72-hour lockdown or the endless debriefings. The temporary base commander found me on day 4. Commander Patricia Osei, brought in from Fort Meade to clean up the mess. She was the first superior officer in 5 years who knocked on my door and waited for me to invite her in. "Commander Crane," she said, and I noticed she used my proper rank without hesitation. "We need you." The offer was everything I should have wanted. Director of Cybersecurity, full restoration of rank and clearance, the corner office with actual windows, a salary that reflected my real qualifications, authority, respect, everything they'd denied me for 5 years, suddenly gift-wrapped and presented with apologies. But sitting there in my familiar windowless office, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Just a deep, tired question that needed an answer before I could move forward. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why didn't anyone ask about my background? 5 years I worked here and not one person wondered why someone with my skills was filing papers and answering phones." Commander Osei didn't have an easy answer. How could she? The truth was ugly and simple. They didn't ask because they didn't see me. Because admin staff were invisible, interchangeable, beneath notice. "You know what I learned here?" I continued. "That institutional blindness is more dangerous than any cyber attack. That arrogance kills just as effectively as incompetence. That the people everyone overlooks are usually the ones holding everything together." I looked at her directly. "If I take this position, things change. Not just titles and org charts, the entire culture." She nodded slowly. "Tell me what you need." And for the first time in 5 years, someone actually listened when I did. 6 months later, and my office has windows now. I can see the perimeter fence, the mountains beyond, actual sunlight that changes throughout the day. But that's not what changed. Not really. I restructured the entire security division from the ground up. Mandatory cross-training for every position. Officers spend time in admin roles. Admin staff get security awareness training that goes beyond the basics. We rotate responsibilities during crisis simulations. The hierarchy flattens when alarms sound because in an emergency, the person with the right knowledge matters more than the person with the right rank. "You can't protect what you don't respect" became our division motto, and I had it engraved on a plaque outside my door. The real victory came 3 weeks ago. A young admin assistant named Bennett approached my office, clearly nervous, holding a tablet with trembling hands. He's 23, fresh out of college, the kind of person who 6 months ago would have been invisible in exactly the way I'd been. "Director Crane?" he said, hesitating at my door. "I probably don't have the clearance for this, but I noticed something unusual in the routine server logs." I stopped everything, put down my coffee, closed my laptop, gave him my full attention. "Tell me." And I listened, because he was right. There was an anomaly. A small one, the kind that could have been nothing or could have been the start of something catastrophic. We caught it early, fixed the vulnerability, and when I filed the report, I put his name first. They called me just administrative staff, because that's all they could see, but invisibility taught me something those officers with their medals and ribbons never learned. The people who keep systems running, who notice every detail, who everyone overlooks, we're not decoration. We're the backbone. And when that backbone breaks, everything falls. Would I change what happened? The humiliation in that auditorium, the years of dismissal, the way they made me feel smaller with every interaction? Sometimes I think about it. Sometimes I wonder who I would have become if Commander Osei had been in charge from the beginning, if respect had been freely given instead of violently taken. But no. I wouldn't change it, because it taught me that power isn't about rank or authority or how loud your voice carries in a room. It's about preparation meeting opportunity. It's about competence that doesn't need announcement. And it's about being underestimated by people too arrogant to know better. Colonel Brennan works a desk job in logistics now, processing supply requests at a base 3,000 miles from here. Lieutenant Cross never got another security posting. Last I heard, she's in the private sector, doing compliance reviews for a mid-sized tech company. And Sergeant Price? He's exactly where he belongs, being supervised by people who actually know what they're doing. And me? I'm exactly where I need to be. Not because I proved them wrong, though I did. Not because I got revenge, though some might call it that. But because I proved to myself that my worth was never theirs to determine. It never was. The override panel is still here, mounted on the wall behind my desk. Sometimes during long days, I look at it and remember that moment, my hand hovering over the scanner, alarms about to scream through the facility, Brennan's voice still echoing in my head telling me I wasn't qualified. That moment when being dismissed, being invisible, being just administrative staff became the exact thing that saved us all. They thought I didn't have access, didn't have authority, didn't belong in their world of classified operations and military precision. They were wrong about all of it. I wasn't just anything. I never was. If this story reminded you that being underestimated is sometimes the biggest advantage you'll ever have, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been called just an assistant, just support staff, just not enough. Subscribe for more stories about the people everyone overlooks, right up until the moment they can't anymore. And remember this: the next time someone dismisses you, the next time someone calls you just anything, smile. Because they've just told you exactly how to surprise them. They've handed you invisibility like a weapon and never realized what you'd do with it. I'm Thalia Crane, former Ghost, current Director of Cybersecurity. And this is what happens when you dismiss the wrong person. They never saw me coming, and by the time they did, it was already too late.